This happened several years ago when I was in college. I lived in a college house with 4 other roommates. We are all guys and love to play video games. Most of the time it's PS5 or something, but I remember that I got a VR gaming set. I always wanted to see what they were like, and I had seen some videos about them and stuff. This is something that actually happened the first day after I got it. After class one day, I went back to my bedroom, which is upstairs. We had 4 bedrooms upstairs, and I had one all to myself. I don't even know what time I started gaming, but I was doing it for a while. At one point, I was standing in the open space of my bedroom and playing Beat Saber. Obviously, I couldn't hear anything aside from the music from the game. In the middle of a round, suddenly, I felt somebody touch my back. At first, I didn't think anything of it because I was really into the game, but like 2 or 3 seconds later, I realized how strange this was, and I jumped back and took off the VR set from my head. I looked around, but nobody was there. My bedroom door was open though, and it hadn't been earlier. I was sure that somebody had touched my back, and there was nothing that could have bumped into me. My bed and desk didn't go up that high. I felt it almost up at my shoulder. I was really confused, but assumed that it must have been one of my roommates, and I left my room and went out into the hallway. The house was completely quiet. By now it was night and also dark outside, and the house was pretty dark inside too, because not very many lights were on. I wondered who was even home. After going out into the hallway, I saw that none of my other roommates were home. Their doors were open, but nobody was in the rooms. Then I went downstairs and saw nobody down there either. All of my roommates appeared to be gone. This was really weird. I went back upstairs and into my bedroom again. Then I shut the door and locked it. I was feeling very creeped out and didn't know what was going on. I went back to the VR gaming for a bit, but I couldn't really focus and was just too creeped out. When I took it off again, things were still very quiet inside the house. But about a minute later, I heard the door to our house open and shut. I thought that maybe one of my roommates was getting home, but it wasn't. I didn't hear any other noises. Nobody walked around the house or went upstairs or anything. I remained in my room and didn't want to get out of it. Everything was completely silent for probably another 30 minutes or so. Then I heard the door open and close again. This time though, I instantly heard the voices of several of my roommates talking. 3 of them had arrived back together. After they were inside, I went down and told them about what had happened. We all searched the entire house up and down, but never found anybody. I think that somebody else entered the house and came into my bedroom when I was gaming. I don't know why or who though. Sure, we had a lot of friends, but there wasn't anybody who would just come over like that. They especially would not go into my room, tap me on the back, and then just leave. It sort of remains a mystery. But I do think, whoever it was, I heard them leaving when I heard the door open and close. I'm guessing one of my roommates forgot to lock the door, and the person just walked in, but I don't know for sure. I used to play VR games a while back. I don't really play them anymore, but I got into them for a little while back in the day. One time, I was playing a couple of multiplayer games. I don't even remember what game it was exactly because I would switch around a lot. A few people were talking though, and as you know, some conversations in online games can be pretty crazy. I wasn't really saying that much, so I was really surprised when kind of randomly a guy came up to me and started talking to me. He was immediately threatening, which was strange, but not all that surprising given the fact that we were playing video games. I started talking to him, asking him what his problem was. He kept repeating that he was going to get me. In the game, I went far away from him, but he followed. I thought that it was pretty funny and also slightly annoying. It seemed like a typical online gaming experience to me. Eventually, I got off the game just because I was tired of it. But later that night is when things turned creepy. For my job and just life in general, I check email a lot. I don't have a specific work email, but just one personal email that I use for everything. I check my email probably 5 times a day or more, and I'm always keeping up with reading the emails and deleting the spam. It was late that night, and I checked my email for about the 10th time that day. I got this weird random email though. It was sent to me from an email address that was really odd. It was like a bunch of random numbers and letters just jumbled. The subject was something like, urgent. I opened it and quickly linked it to the person who had been threatening me in the video game. It said something like, "I told you I was going to get you earlier, and I will." Then there were a bunch of random letters, like the person just hit random keys on the keyboard for a while. The random letters went on for a pretty long time, and then that was it. I'm not going to lie, I was pretty creeped out. How did the person get my email? I had no idea. It wasn't one of my friends or anybody that I knew. I thought about it for a while, trying to figure out who it could be or how they could figure out my email address. I started to wonder if somebody was stalking me or something. Why did they choose to send me an email? Did they know that it's very common for me to use it? I chose not to respond to the email. I wanted to know more, but I was also too creeped out to contact them, so I decided not to. A few days went by, and nothing happened. Everything seemed normal, and I wasn't contacted by the person in any way. I thought that was it, and started to forget about it. But I would say about a week after that first email, I got another one. This one was more descriptive. The same email address sent me an email, once again saying urgent as the subject. When I opened up this one, they described my name and what I looked like, as well as the car that I drove. After reading it, I blocked the email account and reported it. I couldn't believe how this person knew that, and I still have no idea how they did. After that, I was never contacted by them again, and nothing else strange happened. I still wonder about it though. This is something that happened a couple of years ago. I remember that one night I went over to my friend Dom's house to hang out. At the time, I think we were about 16. He lived with his mom, and I remember that she was at work. Dom had recently got a virtual reality headset, and I already had one that I recently got as well. We started playing some games on them in the same room, but standing a few feet apart. The time was probably 8 p.m. It was summer, and we didn't have school or anything the next day, so I didn't have to be back early. A couple of hours went by, and we were still playing VR. That's when it was interrupted by a knock on the door. This seemed odd because of how late it was. We both took our headsets off and walked over to the front door of the house. It wasn't that far away, but from where we were, we couldn't see to the front step. By the time we got to a window that looked out there, no one was there. We both found this odd and a little creepy also. Dom actually went out the front door and walked into the driveway a little bit. He lived in a pretty typical neighborhood that was pretty quiet as well. There were a lot of other houses nearby, and the yards were not very big. He couldn't see anybody though, and he came back inside and said that he didn't know who had knocked. We weren't expecting anybody at all, and thought that maybe it was a prank or somebody at the wrong house. A few minutes later, we both went back to playing VR. But just a few minutes after that, there was knocking again. This time, it was coming from the back door now. We both instantly took our headsets back off again at the same time. It seemed a lot more serious now that the person was at the back door. We couldn't see the back door from where we were at, and I didn't really want to go over there and look. After a few seconds though, Dom headed over, and I followed him. This time, when we got to the back door once again, nobody was there. We were both very creeped out though. I remember that we went all around the house and covered every window. For the next several minutes, there was no knocking or any kind of noise. We were both still really creeped out though. We stopped playing VR and we were just in the living room and talking to each other about what had happened. That's when we thought we heard another noise, but it wasn't knocking. It sounded like somebody laughing in a sinister way. We stopped talking and listened closer. Someone was laughing this really creepy sounding laugh, and it was getting louder. It was coming from behind the house, sort of near the back door. It lasted for about a minute and then stopped. This made us both want to just get out of there. We thought about calling the police, but just weren't too sure about it. It seemed like the person had maybe left because we hadn't heard them in a while now. Still, we didn't feel safe inside Dom's house any longer. Dom called his mom and discussed what was happening. We then decided to go to my house because we didn't want to be at Dom's anymore. We carefully left his house and headed for mine. My house was within walking distance and would take maybe 5 minutes to get there. By now, it was probably like 11 p.m. and really dark out. It was also very quiet, and we both started jogging back to my house. It was a little bit weird to be out on the street, knowing that the person who had been knocking on the door potentially was too. We were lucky to make it back to my house okay and get inside. Once we were in the house though, I realized that my parents had gone to bed. Dom stayed over at my house occasionally because we were best friends, and his mom would work all night sometimes. I had this little couch thing in my room that he would sleep on, and I told him that he could stay over tonight. I was sure that my parents wouldn't mind. We weren't really that tired yet and decided to go back to the VR gaming, which we had brought over from Dom's in our backpacks. But as we were unpacking them, there was then a knocking sound at the back door of my house. We both couldn't believe it. Whoever it was had followed us over. We both ran upstairs to my room, but returned later to check every window and double-check all the locks on the doors. We didn't hear anything for the rest of the night, though. After that night, nothing like that happened again.